I tell them to mind your business. Shit's nasty, dirty ass floor. Oh, don't start filming yet. Let me finish cleaning up. Shit looks nasty. It's good. Trash just about. Sheesh. Oh, there's a dent. Okay. All right, game on. Hey everyone, welcome back to Burk's Garage. So we're back on the 61 GMC 5000 known as GMYRIGGED, and I feel like sometimes I'm all over the place, but then sometimes I look back and I'm like, well, we're making progress, so let's stay all over the place. Well, let me walk you through where we're at right now. So we've got the 6-liter out, the 5-speed, and my next goal is to get the clutch and flywheel in order, so that way we can get that mated back together and back in the frame. As you can see that we've got the cross member just about wrapped up. We've got a few gussets and a few fish places still need to put on there, clean it up, paint it, get it back in, and we still need to get the bolts drilled through from the cross member through the frame, get that trued up once it's all stabbed in. You know, we've got the mounts, you know, the LS conversion mounts put in. So all in all, everything's looking good as far as the power plant from the motor to the trans. What we've done, we've taken the factory C50 front cross member and did some modifications on that to allow that C50 core support to fit down inside of the frame rail, and we're looking about 1 inch from the frame to the bottom of that header panel. So we got the front end as low as we can without Zing the frame. And what we did from there is we set the cab in place. That way we got a parallel line with our front sheet metal to our cab mounts. What we need to do now is we need to get this cab set back into the place of the cab mounts, because ultimately that part's done. And it'll be nice to see this cab sitting where it belongs, so we can really get a good game plan of that wheelbase and how much of a stretch. Because I believe we're around 16 feet from the back of the cab to the back of the frame rail. But something else I'm pondering that I've got in store, and I don't want to break the news, but I think we're just about there. So what we're looking at is getting this cab sitting right back to where it belongs on these factory style cab mounts on this 86 P30 chassis. So we're going to attempt the conventional way, but but the thing is, we've got a goal in mind. I don't care how we're going to get there, but we're going to complete that goal. And that goal is going to have this cab sitting back on those cab mounts, and shortly after, set the engine trans back in it, bolt it in completely, and get that front sheet metal back on it to get that infamous GMC front grille sitting back in place. So I'm really digging. It's all starting to come together now. And as you may or may not know, where it started was I couldn't get brakes on that C50. So I fought for about 2 years trying to get those brakes, and finally I gave up. And I was like, you know what? We're going to swap this over onto a P30. What I was after on this P30 swap was a longer truck, a lower truck, and ultimately better braking system, better gear ratio. I could have a lot more options when it came to the wheels, because I had the old Dayton wheels. I love the wheels, but there's not a lot of variances other than the big 22 and a halves. And I didn't want that 22 and a half on this truck. So the 19 and a halves, maybe 20s when it comes down to it. These right here, these are good placeholders. This keeps us as a roller, except for the rear end right now. But when it comes down to it, we may change these out. As you see, I got a 4x4 block setting where the bump stops go. That's something I still need to pancake it down a little bit lower to where the top of the tire sits at the bottom of the inner fender. So that way we can build our bump stops to that height. So as you notice on our front, we've got a shackle here as a pull point, and this is something that will be braced off the frame rail. And this is something one of my buddies started with, and it's going to go onto this truck here. And as you can see, we've got our cross member pretty much built in here. We've got some fine tuning on that, but we got that built based off the engine and the trans setting 3-degree drop on the parallel line of the frame. And I know you're thinking it's an LS or it doesn't need that, but if I ever converted it back over to the big block, that 3 degrees would be pretty imperative at that point. And it's the same mounting surface of the way the block sits, so we should be pretty close on that. Braking wise, this is something we were able to get the Hydro Boost conversion switched over. So as far as the cab, the pedals, the linkage, all that's in place. And when it comes down to the brakes, we've got new brakes for it. All we've got to do now is plumb the boost to the power steering to the brakes. And we will have brakes on this truck because These parts are pretty much over the counter. One thing that you may have noticed back there in the back, there is a transfer case, and we've also got A-arms here. So I'm kind of torn on this situation because I'd love to make this a 6x6 truck, but the problem I'm running into is I don't have a straight axle to put in it. And when it comes down to it, I'm at that crossroads of I need a two-wheel drive NV 4500 from a 04 2500 pickup. I can't find one, and I know there's parts available to swap the main shaft and the tail shaft, but I'm looking at $1,000 to swap that when I can go out and buy a two-wheel drive for that price. So I'm at that crossroads right now that I just built that cross member for that 5-speed, and then if I find a two-wheel drive, I'll convert it over. One way or another, we'll either swap a transfer case to a two-wheel drive transmission, or we'll swap an I-beam on the front side, or we'll just drive the hell out of it right there with that transfer hanging off of a two-wheel drive truck. I tell them to mind your business. So as you can see out back here, we've got the rear end dropped out of the truck, and that's going to include the front shackle, the rear hanger. So the rear end is just down there hanging on its own. So when it comes to the rear of the truck, I've got a little bit more processing to do to figure out which path I want to take, but I know the rear end is going to have to set up inside the frame in order for this truck to set level. So one of two things that I'm working on: either one, I'm going to work on setting up a step notch on the rear, but with a 16-foot plus bed and a step notch sitting right in the center of it, I don't really feel like I like that too much. So the other thing that I'm thinking is to come right behind the cab, raise that part of the frame rail up, and keep the straight rails all the way back to the rear of the frame. That way I've got straight rails. If I wanted to put a flatbed, a box, a skid, whatever else, I would be able to do that. But if I put a big arch right in the center of the frame, that's going to make it difficult unless I've got that box setting up, 3 feet in the air, and it's going to be much higher than the truck is. So when it comes down to it, I think I've got it figured out, but I've got to do a little bit more processing, making a few more phone calls. So I'm pretty excited about that. But as of right now, I believe we're at about a 20-foot wheelbase from the center to center of where this sits right now. And I believe I'm pretty happy with that. If I went a little bit more, I think that would be nice too, but that road will be crossed in the near future. So I look forward to where this is going at this point. I'm pretty excited. I hope you guys are excited. I want to thank you much for following along. And when it comes down to it, I'm learning a lot, and hopefully you guys can step in and give me some of your tips and tricks. I'm very receptive, and I look forward to hearing from you. So peace out.